Another day, another regulation. Now, President Obama is taking aim at payday lenders, pushing for stricter lending rules to make it harder for them to be in business. You hear me talk a lot on this show about the law of unintended consequences when it comes to our economy, and this, folks, is one prime example. The president wants to penalize these payday lenders because they have some pretty onerous fees. But, you know, here's the thing. Many people depend on these services, and if they don't have them, they're going to be in trouble. Joining me right now, the CEO of Community Financial Services Association of America, Dennis Shaul. Dennis, good to have you here.
Thank you.
You represent the payday lenders, so
Yes.
at least, you know, the viewers understand where you're coming from on
Yes.
this. But what's the concern here? Aside from, you know, your businesses being in trouble or getting squeezed on margins, what's the concern for sort of your average person that depends on them?
Well, the concern is about the customer, because the customer Pew underestimates the actual number of customers. It's more like 16 million a year.
Yeah, they've said 12 million, but you say it's more,
12.
16 million customers.
It's more like 16. And the people who come to us come for a variety of reasons. They may have an emergency. They may need to smooth out their income stream because something has happened to one of two wage earners in the family. They may very well be looking at a situation that they've combated for months and are trying to figure a way out of it. So their need is real, and if we were not there, the opportunity to go to someone far less reputable, who charges more and who has no ability to be taken to a court of law, is much greater. So I think it is a question of the law of unintended consequences, and it comes on the heels of a report last week that said that more than 2/3 of Americans find it difficult to put together $1,000 in an emergency. Yeah. So the question we get to is a very large one, and it is, how do we do more to help people in this section of the economy realize the amount of cash they need to carry them through, in some cases a month, in some cases a much longer period of time. Yeah. And that's where the real reform needs to be.
You know, you think about this, and there are many personal stories. I mean, a mother, for example, that may need to buy formula for her baby, or food for her kids, or someone who needs to get their car fixed, and if they can't come up with the $800 to fix the car, they can't get to work the next day, and they won't be able to continue working. And that's where these payday loans come in, and they do charge some pretty high fees, whether it's 30, 40, 50%. Why do they charge such a high fee?
Well, the reason essentially is that we're talking about an industry that has a fairly large default rate, an industry that has expenses that are very different from a bank's. Particularly storefronts use a fairly inefficient but very acceptable in the neighborhood way to dispense money. So I think the failure here on the part of those who seek reform is to look at the total picture. The reform that we really need is to look at the plight of those who can't get money. And the most expensive money there is that which you can't get when you need it for an emergency. And beyond that, I think there is this tendency, and we have it too, I noticed you just use it, to describe the whole thing by anecdote. And that's important because there are human elements that are deeply embedded in this story. But reform of any kind ought not to depend on anecdotes, but on the hard facts of what we're looking at in the American economy. And what we're looking at as we face this rule that is inspired by the White House and carried off by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is an attempt to put us out of business without an appreciation of two factors that are very important. Year after year, there's a demonstrated need, and that's represented by the 16 million people who come in. That raises the question of whether a governmental bureau or an individual in government knows better than the 16 million people who make an individual choice, which is clearly disclosed for them at all times.
You're absolutely right. I mean, people are making a choice. And as you said, default rates are high. So as an investor, if I'm going to invest in one of these companies, I need to know I can get a certain return. And unfortunately, yes, that return comes with a very high fee that person is going to have to pay. But you know what? They're making a choice, as you say, Dennis. They're making a choice because they need it at that moment. And if you try and over-legislate this, you're going to wind up not having businesses like this in business, and thus that person that needs the loan is not going to be able to get it. I mean, this is you can't legislate all this. You know, they try and redefine human nature and make decisions for people, and that backfires.
And beyond that, we know that these people who are deprived of the availability of this form of credit invariably wind up going to sources, particularly online sources of unregulated
Yes.
entities.
And that's
pay a
not good.
price
And then
for
you
it.
got more trouble there.
Yes.
Dennis, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you very
Trish.
much. We
You're
still got a
welcome.
market rally up 220. We're going to be right back with more.